But now, it is time for Pothead Punditry.
Our nation stands on the brink. Every day brings new federal encroachments that take our freedoms and strangle our will. There comes a time when the silliness must take a back seat to the serious issues of the day. The time is now. It's time to fight back and reclaim the freedom that is rightfully ours. It is time to discuss the serious issues of the day with Stoner Jesus's Pothead Punditry.
Welcome, everyone, to Pothead Punditry, episode 17, right here on the Stoner Jesus Show. Tonight, we're going to talk about the Ron Paul newsletters and the charges that he is racist. We're also going to talk about weed news from the 420times.com. But first, I want to begin with, and we have a clip for the Ron Paul thing. But I want to begin with conspiracy theories. Now, I used to be one of those people who, whenever I heard a quote-unquote conspiracy theory, I was quick to dismiss it. I did no research whatsoever. I didn't look into the issue. And because I always thought to myself, well, our government wouldn't hurt us on purpose, would they? Well, indeed they do. We know they do every day. In many ways, the war on drugs is just one. But if you look at things in the past, like the Warren Commission report on the JFK assassination is total bullshit. Any fucking moron with a first grade education could see the holes in that story. There's many other instances. If you want to go look them up, that's what I urge you to do. You hear a conspiracy theory about any event in American history. If it interests you enough, go research it. The internet had Google. You can fucking find anything on Google and YouTube. Find videos for the conspiracy theory, against it. Decide for yourself. There's no way to know for sure. That's why there's conspiracy theories. But you can make a decision on your own, in your own life. But don't tell me that the government doesn't try to hurt us, because they do. They do it on purpose. They do it by design. They do it every single day we are alive. That's why you should research conspiracy theories. That's why you should look up and see whether you agree with them or not. Because if you do, then a whole new door is opened. But you can find all kinds of shit on the internet. Shit the government doesn't want you to see, but you get to see anyway. Through various things, Freedom of Information Act, WikiLeaks, all kinds of shit. We know more about shit now than we ever did. We use the JFK assassination as an example. The Warren Commission report, go research it. Go look it up. Go type in Warren Commission report in Google. See how many holes are in that motherfucker. It's incredible. Anyway, we continue with Pothead Punditry, episode number 17. Let's see. Oh yeah, Ron Paul. We'll do weed news after a break. We get our weed news exclusively from the 420times.com. But right now, I'm going to play Ron Paul and talk about Ron Paul. There was, I guess, 20 years ago or so, there were some political newsletters put out under Ron Paul's name that had some rather racist innuendos in it. Although, and you'll hear them all in this clip. But this clip basically is an interspersing of black Americans who like Ron Paul, despite these allegations, and YouTube clips that they've made, and it's interspersed with the Reverend Al Sharpton and some other Urkel-looking dude. Is that what Urkel grew up to do? I don't know. Who knows what Urkel's doing right now? Do you see him anywhere? He may be on the news with Al Sharpton. I'm not sure. But they don't like Ron Paul, and they say he is a racist, and they read the things from the newsletters. Now, Ron Paul says that he didn't write these newsletters. He didn't know about them. And the only thing I have to say in that regard is, if there's a politician that was ever born, you can believe him when he says something, it's Ron Paul. You can look at his track record. You can go back as many years as you want to go back. Number two, this is the time to smear him because they're afraid he's going to win Iowa and show good New Hampshire and possibly win the Republican nomination. And nobody can have that. Nobody wants that if you're a part of the establishment. No part of the establishment wants Ron Paul to have a shot at the White House. So they're going to bring out whatever they can. But my main thing, and I tweeted this out the other day, 23 years ago, you can find a clip of him in 1988, Ron Paul, 3 or 4 years before these supposed newsletters came out, talking about the need to end the war on drugs. Now, how could an old, racist, white dude want to release thousands upon thousands of black and Latino and other minorities? Because the statistics show, even though drug use between like whites and blacks is pretty much equal, blacks are arrested much more. So there are many more blacks in prison. So Ron Paul is advocating a policy 3 or 4 years before these newsletters came out that would release hundreds of thousands of black men into society. Would a racist do that? Really? And don't tell me, oh, well, he's just doing the popular thing. 1988, marijuana legalization was not popular. Go look at the Gallup polls. They're at 50% now. I bet they're not even at 20% back then. Maybe in the 20s. I didn't look it up. You can look it up. That's what Google's for. Go Gallup poll, marijuana legalization, 1988. See how popular it was. Was he taking the popular position to release hundreds of thousands of black men? No, he was taking the freedom position. He was taking the libertarian position that says a black man arrested for a bag of weed shouldn't be in fucking prison. It's as simple as that. Unless someone has committed violence on someone else, they shouldn't be in prison. But again, decide for yourself. Look at Ron Paul's policies and what he said and balance it against this newsletter he supposedly wrote that he says someone else wrote. Like I said, who are you going to believe? If there's ever been a politician you can believe, it's Ron Paul. If there's ever been a consistent person and politician in his policies, it's Ron Paul. Let's play this clip. I said it's black Americans interspersed with Al Sharpton talking about the racist rants, and I'll pause it and do commentary in between. Pothead Punditry, episode 17. Let's get to it.
It's amazing how many people don't like Ron Paul out there. You would think that he personally did something to them, or he's like Obama or something.
A lot of stuff he says makes perfect sense.
Ron Paul's numbers up. It's time for him to undergo the smear campaigns.
They're scared half to death of this Ron Paul thing. They're really, truly scared of. You know why? Because it's going to undermine the powers that be, and they can't control him. And I tell you what, we need to get a security force around that man.
You can't convince me that this man is a racist. Just listen to all the stuff he said. He is the least racist out of all the candidates, including Obama.
Jonathan, 2 points here. Let me show some of what was...
Anyway, Friendly Slayer put in the chat room that support was at 24% in 1988. I want to get that out there. Thank you to Friendly Slayer on Twitter for that piece of information. So 24%. You can't tell me he was taking the popular position. Anyway, here's Al Sharpton talking about some of the racist things in the newsletter.
On these newsletters, because it's not just 1 or 2 slip of the tongues in 30 years. This is like some of the most ugly things you could think of. He wrote, order was only restored in L.A., this is after the riots, when it came time for blacks to pick up their welfare checks. Martin Luther King was a world-class philanderer who beat up his paramours.
Okay, first of all, yeah, it's a nasty thing to say, especially the blacks welfare check thing. But I'll reiterate, Ron Paul says he did not write these. And as I said, why advocate drug legalization if you're an old racist white dude? Why not step in a line with all the other old racist white dudes and say, no, keep the black men in prison? Why would he do that back in 1988? I don't know. Second point, I know it's supposed to be racist to talk about Martin Luther King Jr., but the fact remains that Martin Luther King Jr. did cheat on his wife many, many times. The FBI had him recorded. They had him bugged. His every move was known by the FBI because he was a possible quote-unquote communist agitator or some shit. Now, this doesn't mitigate the fact that Martin Luther King Jr. was a great man. He did much for his race and for his people at great personal peril to himself, obviously. He got a bullet through his head. But he could have got killed at any time because there was a lot of white dudes with guns that wanted him dead. It doesn't mitigate the fact. But you cannot say on its face that it's racist to say Martin Luther King cheated on his wife. He did. That was one of his flaws. Whatever. I haven't looked too much into the beating of his wives. But I know there's FBI records where they followed him to his mistress's houses and lofts and hotels and all that other bullshit. So, anyway, continuing with Al Sharpton reading some of the racist things that are in these newsletters.
Israel is an aggressive national socialist state. AIDS patients.
Okay. Israel is an aggressive nationalist socialist state. What is false about that sentence? Again, Ron Paul disavows these things, but I want to look at them on their face. What is wrong about the statement that Israel... Whoops. Smack the fucking microphone. It's extremely unprofessional. Excuse me. What's wrong with that sentence? Now you can say, well, they're aggressive because they're pinned in by their Arab neighbors. That's a fair argument. And they are a nationalist socialist state. The government controls everything in Israel. So, again, I don't know. And there's nothing wrong with that statement. If you're extremely pro-Israel, you gotta look at things logically. Continuing.
Should not be allowed to eat in restaurants because AIDS can be transmitted by saliva. If you've ever been robbed by a black teenage male, you know how unbelievably fleet of foot they can be. I mean, on and on and on. And he says he doesn't know anything about them. He didn't read them. He is not identified then who wrote them if he didn't. I mean, and he's the let me show you the poll. Because people might say, why are you talking about this, Reverend Al? Because he's the front runner in Iowa. And according to this poll, Iowa State University Gazette, KCRG poll, Ron Paul's at 28, Newt Gingrich at 25,
slandering this guy's name and running it through the mud because they are truly afraid that he's going to unleash the potential of the American people, dog. And it would be a revolution, dog. And this revolution doesn't have to be fought with guns and blood flowing in the streets, you know what I mean? It's going to be a philosophical revolution. We have to change the way we're thinking.
So I'll post as a black man. As a matter of fact, I'm going to approach my contribution to Ron Paul's message of liberty from a black perspective, a pro-black perspective.
Welcome back to Politics Nation. Ron Paul has a lot of explaining to do. This week, newsletters were surfaced saying that Ron Paul was the publisher in the 1980s and 1990s. And after they were unearthed, we found they were filled with racist and bigoted rhetoric. In one article, the unnamed author writes, I think we can safely assume that 95% of black males in Washington are semi-criminal or entirely criminal. And another unnamed author questioned whether the 1993 World Trade Center bombing was a setup by the Israeli Mossad. But that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Again, as far as the Israelis having something to do with the World Trade Center bombing in 93 or even the one in 01, it goes back to conspiracy theories and what you want to believe. Things that can't be proven, but you can research them for yourself and make your own decisions. The Israeli Mossad has been caught doing a lot of things, just as the CIA has, and just as everybody else has, every other spy agency in the world. But to say that they're not involved in nefarious dealings that may have a detriment to the United States is to be blind, at the very least. Now, like I said, you can believe the official story, but don't believe it because that's what they told you. Believe it because you researched it, and that is the conclusion you came to. Don't buy a line just because someone says it, just because they're on TV or they're on the radio. Don't believe anything I say. Go research it. Go look what Ron Paul has to say, what Ron Paul's policies are. Don't take my word for it. Continuing with the Reverend Al.
There are dozens of newsletters with the name Ron Paul on it, filled with racist, anti-Semitic, and homophobic rhetoric. Ron Paul is denying that he ever wrote them or read them.
I wanted to make it very clear that Ron Paul, he is not a racist. I mean, look at what he talks about. First of all, he's a libertarian. So, you can't be a libertarian and be racist at the same time. You just can't.
Ron Paul, keep on doing you, man. When they start coming with that nonsense, answer the question like you did, and then take the damn mic off and walk on out the door.
Let me tell you something, folks. This is nothing but grandstanding. We should know the corporatized media are professional spin doctors. They see that this man is in the hunt for the Republican presidential nomination. It's funny. You think, and this is going to be, just really common sense. And since it's racist, and since they're going off the premise that Ron Paul is racist towards black people, then I have to speak to black America right now. I have to speak to, just right now, of course this video is for all, but I'm speaking specifically right now to black Americans, if you're listening. Do you really think the corporatized media cares about how Ron Paul feels about you? Do you really think they really care? And if they do, by exposing him as being some kind of old, white, bigoted racist, what are they going to do about it? Certainly, it's not to raise you out of the condition in which you're in, but only to knock off a man who can bring back the ideas of natural rights, the ideas that I can do for myself without any intervention or meddling from government. Do you really think they care about that? No, they don't. They don't care about you, black America. They want to use the ideas of racism. They want to use this as a tool to knock this man off.
That's what's on.
Jonathan, do you believe Paul's take on these newsletters?
No, I don't. The interview he gave yesterday where he pulled off his mic and said, I didn't write them, somebody else wrote them, I disavowed them, I've answered these questions, now let's move on. Sorry, but that's not good enough. It might be good enough when you're Congressman Ron Paul or when you're Dr. Ron Paul, but when you are a candidate for the nomination of a major political party in the United States and could theoretically, technically speaking, be president of the United States.
So he's a front runner in Iowa.
Well, yes, he is a front runner in Iowa, and if you're going to be that person, then you have to withstand the scrutiny that comes with it. And when you have to answer for the things that are under his name, he has to do more than just say, well, I disavow it and let's just move on.
Well, I think, I was on morning.
What makes this most interesting is his being charged with being a racist because of some comments made in the newsletter that he was over 18 or 20 years ago. I'm not dismissing that, I'm just saying it's interesting because Ron Paul's against the war on drugs, and as it stands now, blacks constitute about 14% of illegal drug users in the United States, but there's 65% of those incarcerated for nonviolent drug use. 14% of the users, 65% incarcerated for nonviolent drug use. That's a huge difference. That's beyond racism. That's way out of proportion. There may be reasons and maybe not, but the bottom line is those are the facts. And those are facts that Ron Paul's actually quoted as well. Now, under Ron Paul, what he would like to do is he'd like to end the war on drugs, first of all. What he would also like to do, the biggest part of this, is that he wants to pardon all nonviolent drug users. That overwhelming disproportionate
My point exactly. Continuing.
A percentage of black people who are incarcerated for nonviolent drug use be then released, which means black uncles, brothers, sisters, cousins, aunts would be released from jail or prison like that. Now, if you want to talk about something someone said under his management of a paper 20 years ago, that's fine. But to me, that totally annihilates any claims of racism. But the thing is, even if he did harbor negative feelings or biased feelings or racist feelings, to be honest, I may have a few feelings about certain groups when I see them too. I don't choose to. It might be the most sophisticated thing, but I think everybody has some group feelings, whether they admit it or not, to an extent. Anybody who's honest does, I would say. And to tell the truth, I don't particularly care if Ron Paul likes people of my height, people of my color, people of my shape, people of my sexuality, people of my income status, people who live in the area I live in. I don't care if he likes me. I just need him to do his fucking job. That's all I care about.
I mean, you've been answering a lot of questions lately about the newsletters that were published under your name, and some of the things contained in them were conspiracy theories. Some of them are considered racist, and you've disavowed them completely. But they were called the Ron Paul Report. And did you read them at all when they were published during those years? Did you ever sort of take a look at it and say, you know what, this isn't what I stand for?
Not all the time.
But you did read them?
Not all the time. Well, on occasion, yes.
And did you ever object when you read them?
Well, we talked about this twice yesterday at CNN. Why don't you go back and look at what I said yesterday on CNN and what I've said for 20-some years. It's 22 years ago. I didn't write them. I disavow them. That's it.
But you made money off of them.
Don't they like Ron Paul? I guess they're brainwashed. No different from the North Korean people, I guess. They brainwashed and believe in all of the status quo. All the rhetoric that these other candidates been talking for years. Ever since presidential debates been going on. I say you only have a handful of candidates that really are for the people. Most of them are not for the people. Most of them will say anything to walk into that office. A lot of people say, well, Ron Paul, he seems like he's saying he can say whatever he wants to step in office. And I said, well, I shot the guy another PM. I said, the difference between Ron Paul and the other candidates is he's not saying what they saying. That's how you can differentiate him from the other candidates. They're saying all the same bullshit that Obama been saying.
Well, first of all, if he didn't know about something that was being put out in his name of such an inflammatory nature, chances are one would question his qualifications to be a chief executive or the executive of a janitor service, for that matter. That's number one.
Everything is dualism. You know what I mean? Like you watch any type of mainstream news outlet. Everything is dualism. Left versus right. Republican versus Democrat. Christian versus Muslim. You know what I mean? And they're all straying away from the fact that we're all people. And the highest level of attainment throughout our history, throughout any civilized nation, has always been to reach for freedom and liberty. You know what I mean? And the fact is, Ron Paul got the best message hands down. And I'm gonna tell you, don't play into the games, man. You know what I mean? Because we fell for that Barack Obama shit. I voted for the dude. You know what I mean? And he was basically running off. I'm a scholar of the Constitution. I will follow the Constitution. This motherfucker's been trampling all over that shit since the day he got into office. You know what I mean?
Hard time trying to convince me that Ron Paul is a racist and that he is bad for America. Because for a while I stopped believing in this voting and all this crap. Because, it looked fraud, and by the way, your media reports, you can tell it's kind of biased. Matter of fact, it's really biased. So I said, man, I don't believe in this crap. After used car salesman Obama came up and just basically crapped on every single body and went against everything he said, I lost hope because I didn't see change. But now Ron Paul, he's making some sense, man. And I can see that this guy, he's legitimate. And you jokers are tripping.
Ron Paul.
Number two, if he didn't write this, he had an association with people who are calling themselves paleo-libertarianists. That's even hard to say. Another way to define that would be knuckle dragging, paleo, paleo whatever. The point is that they were expressing views that are like at the dredges of the libertarian movement. They are disavowed even by people who are libertarians in the mainstream, if there is such a thing. And the fact that Ron Paul would even be associated with these people then and now raises questions about whether he is socially up to this time in history.
Now, check out the website and start listening to a lot of the stuff he says when he's on TV. Because every time I didn't see this dude, he's been making perfect sense about the health care, about the wars, about the Federal Reserve. All of this stuff is just on point, man. And I didn't fact check the dude and everything. And everything he has said has been truth. And a lot of stuff Obama has said has been lies.
I want to talk about what I saw on Fox News about Ron Paul being a spoiler. I'm sorry. I've got to laugh because just the way they say it with such disgust. They make him sound like he's in a box or a carton of eggs in the refrigerator with that. He spoiled it. He's gonna spoil everything. Man, they are fighting hard. They are fighting so hard.
Look at the history of our country and look and see what this country has done to every single presidential candidate that would not bow down their knee to the establishment and do it the way that they say do it. Hey, all this warmongering, senseless, useless and stuff. The empire is on the run and is just about at its end. All you black people out there, don't pay attention to this mudslinging stuff. Take a person at their words. Take a person at their words. And then listen to what they say. And then look at the spirit in which these people speak and talk and how they just continue. You know why? Because they don't have nothing else. Rick Romney is a hypocrite. Michelle Bachmann.
Anyway, that's the end of the clip. Ron Paul, 2012. That's all I got to say.